Hello everyone, David Lang here of Israeli Cool with my weekly fireside chat. Hopefully some of you are out there to listen, but not to worry, this is going to be recorded. So this week's fireside chat, like all fireside chats, are dedicated to the memory of my dear friend Ari Fuld, who was murdered by a Palestinian Arab terrorist 1.5 years ago. And he's back in the news because a judge is deliberating whether to give a life sentence to the piece of garbage that murdered him. And my thoughts and prayers, I know as trite as that sounds, but Hillel Fuld and his whole family, I know them, I love them, and no words can express really what I'm feeling right now and what they're feeling right now, more to the point. That this news is opening up old wounds for them all. So I just wanted to reiterate that all these fireside chats are dedicated to the memory of the great Ari Fuld, a hero, a Lion of Zion. He actually pioneered the barbecue chat. I think he called it Torah and Grill or something along those lines. And although I might not mention it every single week, I just want all of you out there to know that each time I get in front of the camera, in front of a barbecue, it's dedicated to the memory of my dear friend Ari Fuld. May his memory always be a blessing. And, I don't think a life sentence is adequate for the piece of excrement that murdered him. He's a lion of a man, seriously, physically and spiritually, in all ways. And it took a little piece of garbage to sneak up from behind with a knife to try to murder him. He succeeded, but not before Ari, being the courageous guy that he was, went after him and shot at him. So I'm going to put it out there. I think terrorists should get the death sentence. They're trying to inflict death on not just one person in most cases, but a number of people. And I'm all for the death sentence for these terrorists. Put it out there. I'm not going to stand down from that. Death sentence, and also from a practical point of view, there should be the death sentence because invariably we start negotiating for dead bodies of our soldiers that Hamas and other terrorist organizations have captured, and we give back these terrorists, and they more often than not go back to their murderous ways because it's in their DNA basically. That's what they love doing. So again, today's fireside chat is dedicated to the memory of Ari Fuld. And my thoughts and prayers are with the Fuld family, with Hillel and family. And again, I'm not saying this in a trite way, I actually know them. And I don't actually have any more words. I can't imagine what you guys are feeling right now. I also want to shout out to my dear friend Levi. Levi, Mazal Tov on your birthday, which was yesterday. Or was it the day before? Levi asked me actually to give a shout out on my weekly Burnside chat. Yeah, Levi's having a bit of a problem with the name of these videos, but he's the same Levi that a few weeks ago referred to this as the backside grill. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, Burnside chat, I'll take that. It sounds way less painful than the backside grill. Levi, I know, how old are you now? 50 or so? I know at your age, maybe your memory goes a little bit and it's a bit hard to remember things. So, I have a bit of sympathy for you. Not that I'm that far off myself. Anyway, Mazal Tov, mate, in all seriousness. Good stuff. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? I don't want to rehash over everything that I've written about, but obviously, George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests are still very much in the news, and I don't want to go over everything again. I just want to point out some of the things I've covered this week, and then I'm going to slam political correctness, the scourge of our generation. Okay, so this week I spoke about how Zionists, not just Jews, but actual Zionists, which are just basically proud Jews, that uphold a pillar of Judaism, that this is our homeland. We were at the forefront of Black Lives Mattering, okay? We are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. We're not hijacking any causes like certain peoples. Okay, you can read between the lines in what I'm talking about there. And we have a history of showing that Black Lives Matters. And I'm only mentioning this because, not that I'm asking for thanks or anything like that, but because there's a concerted campaign by the Palestinian Arabs and the Israel haters to somehow connect us to the murder of George Floyd, the actual opposite. But we have a long history of basically just doing it, of showing our solidarity with our black brothers and sisters. Now you look at, for instance, we brought tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews to Israel, okay? Operation Solomon and Moses. We did that. We went to different lands to bring them from Africa, from Ethiopia. We did that. And the chutzpanim, you know, the Israel haters will point to the fact that there is discrimination in Israel, and there is discrimination in Israel, but it's not systemic. There are, you know, a-holes everywhere. Ignorant people everywhere. They're not necessarily a-holes, they could just be ignorant. But there's no systemic racism here. We have Ethiopian members of the Knesset. But the fact remains, I don't want to go into all that now, but the fact remains that we brought out at least 20,000 Ethiopians. We went in covert operations to bring them from Ethiopia. How ridiculous it is to anyone to point out that we did that, and then that because there's some ignorant people in Israel, like any other place in the world, that somehow we treat blacks badly. Come on, don't insult our intelligence. That's one example of Zionists showing that Black Lives Matter. Another example is that in the civil rights movement, you had not just Jews, you had actual Zionists at the forefront of this movement in a disproportionate manner. The great Rabbi Heschel, Avraham Heschel, who's in those pictures, those iconic pictures with the great Martin Luther King, Zionist. I wrote all about this, I'm not going to explain it all now. You had a guy called Morris Abrahams, who is actually, or Abrahams, who's the founder of the great Human Rights Watch. Also pictured of Martin Luther King. He was a great human rights attorney, civil rights attorney. Zionist, not just Jew. So, you know, we're not shouting this from the rooftops, and I wrote that post not to ask for thanks again, but just to point out, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. The haters are trying to put out the exact opposite of what the case is. So I feel the need to put out that information. Check that post out. It's all on israelicool.com. That's one of the posts I did this week. Another post regarding this issue is I pointed out the anti-Semitism of the movement Black Lives Matters. Last week I spoke about Black Lives Mattering, and maybe there was a bit of confusion, so I want to make it very clear what I'm talking about. I support the notion of Black Lives Matters. The notion, the concept. It's a catch cry of the protests. In addition, there is an actual movement called Black Lives Matters. They're despicable on an organizational level, okay? Quote me on that. They're despicable on an organizational level. They are anti-Semitic. There is a policy document, and again, I have a post on this, which isn't just anti-Israel, it's anti-Semitic. They accuse us of genocide, not true. The Arab and Palestinian Arab population has grown exponentially since the founding of the State of Israel in 1948. Look it up. Nothing I'm saying here is false and is all verifiable. So, I mean, it's absolute garbage what's going on with the Black Lives... that's one example of the anti-Semitism of the Black Lives Matters movement, which I deplore. Then you have all these... leaders and influential people like Sean King of the Black Lives Matters movement, it's beyond anti-Israel. Again, they are serenading, they are in cahoots with the despicable Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And you can also look that up. That's in the news. They appear with them. They have them as their security. There's inextricable links between the anti-Semitic Nation of Islam and the Black Lives Matters movement. And I have other examples of the anti-Semitism of the movement. On an organizational level, again, this is not saying that every person that protests in these protests in the United States of America know about this, even care about Israel. It's a peripheral issue for most of them. I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, there are different extremes on this issue. On one hand, there are those out there who don't even think there's systemic racism against blacks, there's systemic discrimination against blacks. And you think that you should, and I should shut up about it, and we should criticize all of these protests and stay the hell away. And I disagree with that. And in fact, my point of view is I have a lot to learn on it. And while Black Lives Matters is definitely, as a movement, is terrible, not all the protesters are into that. The majority are not, okay? And therefore, I don't subscribe to that view. On the other extreme, there are those of you that think we should ignore the anti-Semitism of the Black Lives Matters movement because what's more important is showing solidarity with our blacks, brothers and sisters. And I pointed to a certain article in the Jewish Journal in my post, which by an Israel advocate, Hen Mazig, who I respect. But on this particular case, I had to argue against what he was talking about. Not attacking the guy, attacking the argument. We cannot ignore anti-Semitism. No one's going to stick up for us. We have to stick up for ourselves. Call out Black Lives Matters on an organizational level. We have to do that. But at the same time, I think Judaism is about compassion, and there are grievances of the black community, my brothers and sisters, and what I'm trying to do, I'm reaching out to them. And I'm not saying this in a kind of virtue signaling way. I have friends who are African American, and privately I'm just reaching out to them and just trying to find out more, because shutting them up because there are some black people that say there's no systemic racism is not the way to go. It's dumb. Okay, all of you out there doing that, it's a dumb argument. Okay, you think you're right because you're pointing out a few people, or maybe there's quite a lot of people that have that view, but there are also those people that have felt discrimination, very good people. And I'm actually hoping to be interviewing quite a prominent Jewish African-American or African-American Jew hopefully next week. I'm just trying to iron out when. Stay tuned for that. Just to get their point of view. I'm trying to keep an open mind about it. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to show, and me and others are trying to show empathy towards our black brothers and sisters who are feeling discrimination on some level. And if you want to throw statistics at me and others about if they're systemic or not, come on, hold it. Okay? Listen for a change. Cut out with the confirmation bias. You might think you're right, but it cannot hurt to listen. But I agree with you that Black Lives Matter is anti-Semitic. We shouldn't shut up about it. We need to call them out on it. I mean, that's an imperative, and that's my view. So maybe I'm a little bit in the middle, but I've thought long and hard about this, and I'm always, trying to think more about these issues and keep an open mind and be intellectually honest about it. Anyway, that's what I feel about it. I don't want to look at my posts. The third post I posted this week on this topic was about the rapper Ice Cube. Has millions of followers and millions of fans. And he's been basically disseminating really disgusting anti-Semitism on social media. Calling us fake Jews. It's basically Farrakhanism. If you're familiar with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, what he's perpetuating, the views he's perpetuating, is basically from their playbook. He's clearly an acolyte of them. He's been photographed with Louis Farrakhan. I mean, this guy's got influence. Some of you might say, I've never heard of him. Doesn't matter if you've heard of him or not. It's an objective fact this guy has millions of followers. So I wrote a letter to him basically calling him out on it and saying, listen, all the things I've just discussed regarding that we, the Jewish people, obviously we're not fake Jews. We are Jews. And stop trying to, I understand why Farrakhan and others, it's an attractive argument to say they're the real Jews, the lost tribe of Israel, and we're fake. But then they're absolved for all responsibility for what's happened to them. Not that what's happened to them is necessarily their fault, but what I'm saying is it's a kind of a convenient argument. And we're the big bads. And we're the white privileged people. Well, we're not white, first of all. And I've discussed this in the previous, and on the blog, on the previous talk and on the blog. We're not white. And why are you putting us down? And again, I spoke about in this letter to him how we're at the forefront of the civil rights movement and you should partner with us and learn from us because we've experienced so much discrimination and persecution over the years and we want to help. Anyway, so some of you out there were saying, I don't think Ice Cube's going to listen to you. And I agree with that, but you're missing the whole point. So let me just spell it out clearly. When I engage with anti-Semites, which I do, I'm not trying to convince the anti-Semite themselves, who's entrenched in their views, I'm not trying to convince them of the error of their ways. Maybe I'm wrong in doing that, but I just don't have the time and patience. Some of you might have the time and patience. I don't have the time and patience for that. It's for the edification of my target audience, which are the intellectually honest people out there that may be on the fence or maybe possibly influenced by such people. So when I have these discussions, when I write these posts, when I tweet these tweets, it's for you guys. It's not for the anti-Semites themselves. I've kind of given up hope on them. Now, maybe I'm wrong in that, and maybe there are some anti-Semites that might be convinced otherwise, and if Ice Cube wants to change his ways, I welcome that. But you're missing the point if you say to me, he's not going to listen to you. Yeah, I know that. He's probably not going to listen to me, but that's not the point. Okay, so that was the third post on this issue this week. And again, I don't want to regurgitate over everything. Please read it if you're that way inclined. What I wanted to briefly talk about today is political correctness gone wild. I detest political correctness. I'm an Australian after all. Australians, for the most part, are one of the most politically incorrect people in the world, and I love that. Political correctness is a scourge of our generation. And what I read this week was that HBO Max, I think it was called, are pulling Gone with the Wind, one of the greatest movies of all time. They're pulling it because it's not woke enough, because it depicts the Confederacy and slavery in a glorified way. So they're going to pull it and sort of add historical context and then bring it back up again. That's absolute garbage as far as I'm concerned. By the way, there's also talk that the BBC, I think it was, or UK television are pulling the iconic episodes of the amazing Fawlty Towers, which talks about don't mention the war to the German guests. They're going to pull that as well, because that's also not politically correct. And there's also talk, comedians out there that, in their jokes, they talk about stereotypes, but their way of doing that, or their purpose in doing that, is basically to show the idiocy of bigotry. They're also worried now because of this wokeness and this political correctness. And, imagine if Sacha Baron Cohen, with his Borat character, throw the Jew down the well, he's censored. Can you imagine how terrible that will be? I mean, this is basically, you have the far left, right? The Antifa, who are anti-fascist. You see that they're actually kind of fascists, right? They're trying to curtail our rights and liberties. It's a bit of an irony in a way. Now, I don't think we should be censoring people like that and pulling Gone with the Wind. What I see is a great educational opportunity. Think about it. You could have media and film courses talking about how the period in which a film is made affects the depiction of certain characters or certain events in that film. That's a great educational opportunity. Let's talk about it. Why are we censoring? Why are we trying to pull these things? By the way, with Gone with the Wind, Hattie McDaniel, who was the black woman that played the main slave in that movie, she won the supporting actor Oscar. Should we invalidate that because the movie is completely null and void? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I'm sick of these snowflakes out there who are basically trying to curtail all of our rights and have these discussions, these important discussions. I'm not saying they're not. But let's have the discussions. Why are you scared of it? Some of you out there might be thinking, oh, Dave, you're a hypocrite, because don't you call out anti-Semites? And my answer to those of you that might think that is, yeah, I do call out anti-Semites. I don't censor them. I call them out. I actually use it it's exactly this. I use these anti-Semitic social media posts as an educational opportunity to show how anti-Zionism is almost always anti-Semitism. I don't go and hit report these posts to Facebook or Twitter. Maybe some of you do, but that's not my thing. Now, if it's calling for violence and trying to get Jews murdered, then that's where I draw the line. But other than that, I believe in free speech, and actually I try to use the free speech of these anti-Semites and racists against themselves. And in this case, I think we should be doing that as well. We shouldn't be trying to curtail free speech in this way. And I think just things have gone out of line. I mean, you also see these far left people, they're ripping down these statues. Okay, some of the statues of people that they believe have been bad people, but some of these statues were actually of people that were helping the African Americans back in the day. I mean, these are just a bunch of sheep that don't know what they're doing. They're populists. They're sort of virtue signalers, and they're snowflakes and all the the different epithets I can use. But it's a real thing, and we should all stand for free speech. So that's what I wanted to talk about this week. It really pains me and it disgusts me, actually, and we need to fight this. These are the new fascists. The people that claim they're against fascism, they're the new fascists. And they're not strong in their own arguments. They don't have confidence in their own belief system. And those of us that do, we need to fight this with all our might. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say this week. One more important point. I noticed that Bill and Ted 3 is coming out. There was a trailer. You know, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, 2 of the greatest movies of all time. Thank you very much, in my view. Keanu Reeves and a guy called Alex Winter. They dropped a trailer this week. And why am I mentioning this? Because I really believe in the philosophy of Bill and Ted. And Bill and Ted, what do they say? What's their philosophy? They always say, be excellent to each other. And then it's just a phrase in the movie, right? In a silly movie. But think about that for a second. Think about that for more than a second. Be excellent to each other. That's what we need to do. Let's be excellent to each other. But at the same time, being excellent to each other isn't being all politically correct and virtue signaling and saying a bunch of stuff on social media. It's doing, and it's just treating others with respect, others with different opinions, and not being afraid to have these discussions, and then using proofs to back up your claims. Okay, that's what I wanted to say this week. Shabbat Shalom to all my Jewish audience, and have a great weekend to everyone else, and everyone out there, a peaceful weekend. Take care, everyone.